The bond an avoidant can't escape is not with just anyone. It's with the person who looked past the mask, past the defenses, past the curated version of them the world sees, and chose to love the raw, unedited them. And that kind of bond is rare, because most people only ever engage with an avoidant at surface level. They accept the "I'm fine," they laugh at the sarcasm, they flirt with the charm, they skate around the intimacy. But you didn't. You kept leaning in when things got real. You heard the crack in their voice when they said, "It's whatever." You felt the weight behind their "I don't care." You watched the way their eyes shifted when certain topics came up. And instead of backing away or making it about you, you held space. You listened. You saw them even in the moments they were trying desperately not to be seen. And something in their nervous system registered that as different, as dangerous and safe at the same time. For someone who has built their identity on self-protection, being truly seen feels like standing under a bright light, naked. It triggers ancient panic. If you see all of me, you'll reject me, control me, abandon me. But you didn't. You stayed. You cared. And you didn't just love the version of them who was strong, funny, and composed. You stayed on the days they were shut down, triggered, avoidant, messy. You saw their darkness, their emotional disappearances, their anger, their fears, their failures, and you did not withdraw your love. You might have set boundaries or called out their behavior, but you still spoke to their deeper goodness. You still saw the child underneath who learned that closeness equals danger. That's what loving their truth instead of their performance actually means. You didn't fall for the persona. You fell for the real them that even they are afraid of. The part that wants love but doesn't trust it. The part that wants to be held but doesn't know how to stay. To an avoidant, most relationships feel transactional. They give enough to keep the connection alive while staying far enough back to not risk their heart. So when someone genuinely attunes to their inner world, remembers their stories, cares about their triggers, and loves them beyond what they do into who they are, it creates an imprint that goes deeper than their usual interactions. This imprint is the bond. They might tell themselves you were too intense, too sensitive, too much. But that is language they use to keep distance from how profoundly they actually felt held by you. It's easier for them to minimize you than to admit that someone finally broke through their armor, because if they admit that, they also have to face the reality that they ran from the one thing they've secretly craved their whole life. You became the person who caught glimpses of their shadow and didn't flinch, who saw their coping mechanisms and didn't demonize them, who named the pattern without shaming the person. And that is disarming for someone who has survived by staying unknowable. Even when they leave, they cannot unlive the experience of being known by you at that depth. So they will compare future connections, often unconsciously, against what they had with you. They will notice that other people only understand the version they present, while you understood the parts they tried to hide. They will notice that others love their charm, their talent, their looks, their status, but you loved their vulnerability, their cracks, their attempts, their effort when it cost them comfort. The bond they can't escape is not about obsession or possession. It's about recognition. You recognized their soul underneath their survival strategy. You reflected back to them a self that was more whole than the fragmented identity they operate from. And that kind of reflection sticks to the psyche. It stays in the background long after contact ends. They can distance themselves from you physically, mute you, ignore you, replace you on the surface. But they cannot distance themselves from the internal shift that happened when they experienced what it was like to be seen and still held. Because that experience quietly exposes everything less as not quite it. That's why no matter how far they run, they will always remember the one person who loved their truth, not their performance, you. And that memory will live inside them as both comfort and discomfort. Comfort because they were finally known, and discomfort because they're the one who walked away from the one person who really saw them. Even when an avoidant runs, Their body and mind remember how it felt to be fully seen and safe, and that memory becomes an imprint they cannot outrun, no matter how many new people they meet or how many distractions they stack on top. Because the nervous system is not logical, it is experiential. It records how something felt, not just what it looked like on paper. And with you, whether they admit it or not, they experienced a level of emotional safety and understanding that their system was not used to. You were the person who didn't punish their vulnerability, who didn't mock their softness, who didn't weaponize their honesty. You were the one who could sit in their silence without panicking, hold their truth without judgment, and reflect back to them, "You are not broken, you are just scared." And that changes people on a level they do not have language for. When they lay next to you and finally let themselves exhale, when they broke down and you didn't walk away, when they confessed things they'd never said out loud and the room stayed safe. Those moments etched themselves into their nervous system as proof that intimacy did not automatically equal danger, that being seen did not automatically lead to rejection. And that kind of proof does not just fade because someone hits the eject button out of fear. It lives in their body like a quiet benchmark, a "this is what it can feel like" reference point that every other connection after you is unconsciously measured against. So even when they choose distance, when they say, "This is too much, I can't do this, I'm not ready," their mind is not erasing you. It is trying to bury the discomfort of having felt that safe and that exposed. Because for someone who has survived by staying emotionally self-contained, safety itself can feel threatening. It asks them to let go of control, to admit need, to risk loss. And that is exactly what they're running from. Not you as a person, but the experience of being that open, that vulnerable, that held. They will try to outrun that imprint with busyness and noise. They will throw themselves into work, hobbies, casual dating, social media, shallow flirtations, anything that keeps them from sitting still long enough to feel the echo of what they had with you. On the surface, it may look like they've moved on seamlessly, but their body betrays them in the quiet moments. A song comes on and their chest tightens. They smell something that reminds them of your space and their stomach drops. Someone touches them in a familiar way, and instead of relaxing, they tense, because their system knows this is not the same. This person has not earned the level of safety you did. This moment doesn't carry the same depth. And even if they don't consciously compare, a part of them feels the difference. That's the thing about an imprint. It doesn't need their permission to exist. It doesn't ask if they're ready to feel it. It simply is. A felt memory of regulation, comfort, emotional resonance. And because they once had that with you, their nervous system will always know when it's not there. They can pretend to be fine. They can talk about enjoying their freedom, but their sleep, their stress levels, their inability to fully relax in newer, safer-looking connections tell another story. And the mind, as clever as it is, cannot fully override what the body knows. So while they're scrolling, laughing with friends, or lying next to someone else, there are flashes, micro moments, where they remember how your presence made their guard drop without effort, how your voice soothed them when they were spiraling, how your understanding calmed storms before they exploded, and it hits them like a glitch in the matrix, a brief, uncomfortable awareness that they had something real and couldn't hold it. Distractions can delay that awareness, but they can't delete it, because the imprint lives beneath their conscious narrative. It's stored in the part of them that remembers how it felt to be met instead of managed, seen instead of tolerated, loved instead of just handled. And as time goes on, that memory often grows louder, not quieter, especially when life gets hard, in crisis. Their body instinctively reaches for the last place it felt truly safe. And if that place was with you, they will think of you. Not because they chose to, but because their nervous system associated your presence with grounding, with relief, with a soft landing. This is why they may suddenly check your profile after a long silence, why they might reach out after a major life event, why they sometimes appear out of nowhere with a, "I've been thinking about you." It's not random. It's their mind briefly aligning with what their body has known all along, that the connection they ran from is also the connection that made them feel the most regulated. And that contradiction is something they can't fully reconcile. None of this means you're supposed to wait for them, or that their imprint on them obligates you to remain available. It simply means you were not imagining the depth. You were not crazy for feeling how strong the bond was. They felt it too, even if they put distance over devotion. And while they can run from you in the physical world, what they can never fully escape is the part of themselves that woke up when they were loved by you in a way that made their fear visible, and their heart, for a moment, finally feel at home. Your presence became a mirror for their highest self, and that mirror doesn't go away just because they left. Because what you reflected back to them was not just affection or attention, it was a version of them they secretly wished they could live in all the time. The version that is softer, braver, more honest, more loving, more capable of closeness than their fear allows them to be. And that is why they can't escape the bond. Every time they looked into your eyes and saw patience where they expected frustration, understanding where they expected judgment, a willingness to stay where they expected abandonment, they were being shown a self that contradicted their inner story, the story that says, "I am too much, not enough, unlovable, unsafe to know." You were living, breathing proof that this story wasn't the whole truth. And even if they ran, they cannot erase the memory of being seen in that more complete way. Around you, they weren't just the cool one, the detached one, the one who didn't need anyone. They were the one who opened up at 1 a.m. and talked about childhood, the one who admitted they were scared of depending on anyone, the one who let their guard down and showed you the raw wounds underneath the mask. And you didn't flinch. You didn't use their vulnerability against them. You didn't suddenly treat them like a project or a broken thing. You treated those moments as sacred. And in doing that, you held up a mirror that said, "This is you too. Not just the avoidant, not just the runner, but the person who can feel deeply, love deeply, connect deeply." That image of themselves is not something they can unsee. It's burned into their psyche as an alternate identity, a path they could choose if they were willing to face their fear. So when they go into other connections, into shallow situationships, into casual flings, into performances where they get to stay emotionally half present, that mirror quietly follows them. Every time someone only connects with their surface, their humor, their body, their charm, a part of them remembers what it felt like when someone connected to their soul, when someone saw the tiredness behind the jokes, the sadness behind the "I'm fine," the longing behind the distance. And those newer, safer feeling connections don't hit as deeply. They might be easier, more controlled, less confronting, but they are thinner. They lack the reflection of that higher self you saw and spoke to. And over time, that thinness starts to bother them, even if they don't fully understand why. Your presence called something forward in them. You didn't fall for their potential as a fantasy. You actively engaged with the part of them that wanted to rise. You challenged their shutdowns. You gently named their avoidance. You held them accountable without shaming them. You encouraged them to be honest about their feelings. You asked the hard questions. What do you actually want? What are you really afraid of? What would it look like to stay instead of run? And each time they leaned into those questions, even a little, they were stepping closer to that highest self, the brave self, the present self, the self that can tolerate intimacy without collapsing. That experience becomes a blueprint, a map inside them that shows, this is who I can be when I don't hide. They may reject the map for now, throw it in a drawer, pretend they lost it, but it is still there. And every relationship they enter after you is subconsciously measured against that fuller version of themselves they touched when they were with you. This is why the bond feels inescapable for them, because it's no longer just about missing you as a person. It's about missing the version of themselves they became with you, when they laugh in a new relationship but realize it doesn't reach the same depth. When they have a conversation and notice they are performing instead of existing. When they feel lonely, even lying next to someone. That's the mirror at work, quietly reflecting back. You have known something deeper than this. You have been someone braver than this. It exposes the shallowness of anything less, not by shaming them, but by reminding them of the contrast. And even if they try to twist the narrative in their head, tell themselves, we were too intense, it wouldn't have worked, I'm better like this, that inner mirror doesn't fully buy it, because it remembers the way their chest felt lighter after telling you the truth, the way their body finally relaxed when they stopped pretending, the way their soul felt when they were met instead of managed. That memory becomes a quiet rebellion against the smaller life their fear wants them to live. And no amount of running can completely silence that. What you need to understand is that being that mirror was not a small thing. Your presence showed them possibilities inside themselves they would never have touched alone. You woke up their highest self and, for a while, held space for it to breathe, even if they chose not to stay there. Even if they retreated back into old patterns, that doesn't erase the fact that now they know. They know what they are capable of feeling, giving, becoming. And that knowing will forever make shallow, avoidant living less satisfying, less convincing. Your bond is the tension between who they are when they're scared and who they tasted themselves to be when they were with you. And that tension is something they can numb, delay, deny, but not truly escape. Distance doesn't actually dissolve the bond for the avoidant. It amplifies it. Because when you step out of the dynamic and your regulating energy is no longer there, they are left alone with the very feelings they were using you to avoid. And that is what begins to echo louder and louder in the silence. While you were still in contact, even if things were messy, you were a stabilizer for them. Your presence, your understanding, your check-ins, your emotional intelligence acted like a buffer between them and their own unresolved pain. When they were spiraling, they could vent to you. When they were numb, they could lean on your warmth. When they were triggered, they could blame your intensity instead of confronting their fear of intimacy. In a twisted way, your availability allowed them to keep their defenses without completely collapsing, because you were doing the heavy lifting of emotional regulation for both of you. When you step back, when you stop over-explaining, stop rescuing, stop soothing them before they have to sit with themselves, all of that regulation disappears. And at first, they might experience that as relief. No more pressure, no more deep talks, no more expectations. But relief is just the first layer. Underneath it is everything they were running from, and now there is no one in the room to absorb it for them. Your silence becomes a mirror, not just of what they lost externally, but of what they have not yet built internally. Before, when they felt restless, lonely, or overwhelmed, they could text you, or even just know that you were there, and that alone settled part of their nervous system. Now, when those same waves of restlessness or loneliness hit, there is no automatic soothing presence to lean on. The old strategies they use to manage their emotions, distancing, dismissing, numbing, don't land the same way. Because they've already experienced what it's like to have someone regulate with them instead of against them. And the absence of that contrast makes the emptiness sharper. Distance forces them to hear the echo of what they tried so hard to mute. The echo of your voice, calling them out lovingly. The echo of your boundaries. The echo of the moments they pushed you away and saw the hurt in your eyes. The echo of the truth you spoke about their patterns. And without you there to distract themselves with, those echoes ring louder in their own mind. They might try to drown them out with more work, more noise, more people, but it takes more and more to override what their system already knows. That being with you brought a sense of connection and grounding they haven't been able to recreate simply by running back to the safety of their avoidance. When the late-night anxiety hits now, they don't just feel anxious. They remember that there was a time when they could call or text and feel genuinely seen. When conflict arises in new situationships, they don't just feel irritated. They remember that there was a time when someone was willing to go beneath the surface and talk honestly. When they feel misunderstood by others, they can't help but compare it to how easily you read them without them having to say much. That is how distance amplifies the bond. The more life gives them lesser versions of what you offered, the more obvious it becomes what they walked away from. And here's the piece that often goes unseen. Your regulating energy also softened how they experienced themselves. With you around, their worst days were buffered. You were there to normalize their reactions, to remind them they weren't monsters, to contextualize their triggers. So while they were with you, they could feel flawed but still loved, damaged but still worthy, terrified but still chosen. Without you there reflecting that back, they are left alone with their inner critic, the voice that says, "You always ruin everything, nobody stays, you're too much and not enough." And with no one calling that voice out as a lie, it starts to sound more believable again. But it doesn't feel quite as airtight as before, because some part of them remembers that you didn't see them that way, and that creates a painful internal conflict. They ran to get away from the intensity of feeling so much with you, but in the distance, they are feeling even more of themselves, without the comfort of your acceptance to soften it. So no, distance doesn't just fade you into the background like a stranger they dated once. It actually turns the volume up on what your presence meant. Not because you are chasing, but precisely because you are not. Without your constant emotional availability, their system has to metabolize what happened between you. And it does so by replaying, re-examining, re-feeling, often in moments they least expect. Driving alone, scrolling at night, hearing a phrase you used to say, seeing a couple interact in a way that reminds them of your dynamic. Each of those moments is like an echo chamber, amplifying the original frequency of the bond. They might not tell you this. They might act busy, cool, detached. They might even convince themselves when talking to others that it wasn't that deep. But distance has given them something they never allowed while you were there. No choice but to sit with the internal impact of having been loved by you. And that is why the bond doesn't weaken for them just because you stepped away. In many cases, it is the very space you created that finally makes them feel just how strong it always was. Just because they can't escape the bond doesn't mean it's your job to hold it up, feed it, or stand at the door of it forever. And this is where your heart has to learn a new kind of strength. Because for so long, you lived with the secret belief that if they ever truly realized what you were, how deep the connection was, how real your love felt, then the story would finally turn in your favor. So when you hear that they do feel it, that they can't outrun it, a part of you wants to immediately jump back into position, ready to rescue, ready to receive, ready to prove that the bond was worth coming back for. But their inability to escape the bond is their experience, their lesson, their reckoning, not your assignment. The fact that the connection lives inside them does not mean you must keep yourself on pause, half alive, waiting for them to decide what to do with it. For a long time, you probably made their emotional realization the finish line in your head. You thought, if they could just see what they're running from, if they could just feel what I feel, everything would change. And now you're being told that yes, they do feel it. Yes, it does haunt them. Yes, they are affected more than they show. And there's this bittersweet ache, because it validates your intuition, but it also exposes a deeper truth. Their feelings alone are not enough. They can feel the bond and still choose safety over growth. They can miss you deeply and still cling to their patterns. They can be moved by the memory of you and still not step into the work that real intimacy requires. You cannot confuse impact with responsibility. You were impactful. You left an imprint. You mattered. But it is their responsibility to decide what to do with that. not yours to manage, coax, or drag them into becoming the version of themselves this bond invited them to be. The bond exists inside them, whether you text them or not, whether you wait for them or not, whether you stand by the door or walk away and build a life that has nothing to do with their indecision. You don't keep the connection alive by suffering at a distance. This isn't a fairy tale where devotion is measured by how long you can sit in emotional limbo. The connection is real because of who you were, how you showed up, how deeply you loved, what your presence awakened in them. That doesn't evaporate just because you stop over-functioning around it. If anything, your decision to stop rescuing, to stop chasing, to stop proving your worth actually makes the bond more obvious to them. Because now they are alone with the echo of it, and they can't anesthetize it by relying on your constant availability. You have to let go of the idea that love means waiting in the same spot until the other person is ready. That idea is what almost destroyed you. You kept yourself small, stuck, frozen, thinking that leaving the waiting room would somehow erase what you had, that moving on would mean it wasn't that deep after all. So you stayed. Not physically maybe, but energetically, checking their page, replaying the memories, analyzing signs, tethered to the possibility that one day they would wake up and say, "I get it now. I choose you." But here is the truth that will set you free. If they ever reach that point, the bond will still be there for them, whether you have been waiting or not, whether you are available or not, whether you still want it or have outgrown it entirely. The bond lives in their nervous system now, just as it lives in yours. You don't have to babysit it. Your job is not to be their lighthouse forever. Your job is to be your own. You can love the connection, honor it, even cry over it, and still release the role of savior. You are not the healer appointed to drag them out of their avoidance. You are not the constant they get to return to after each run just to reassure themselves that they haven't truly lost anything. The bond does not entitle them to indefinite access to your heart. It also doesn't chain you to their timeline. You are allowed to keep walking, to build a life with someone who doesn't have to lose you to understand your value, someone who doesn't need to be haunted to wake up. One of the most powerful shifts you will ever make is this. Instead of thinking, "We are connected, so I must hold on," you start thinking, "We are connected, and I am still free to choose what is healthy for me." The bond explains why it hurts, why it lingers, why it changed you, but it does not dictate that you must stay emotionally available to someone who isn't showing up in reality. You can trust that what you were to them will never be forgotten, and still refuse to live in waiting mode. You can trust that they will feel the weight of losing you in their own time, and still choose not to be there when they finally do. Their inability to escape the bond is not supposed to be your comfort blanket or your prison. It's simply a reminder that you were never too much, never delusional, never alone in feeling how powerful it was. Let that validate you. Let it heal the part of you that wondered if you imagined it all. And then let it go. The next chapter of your life is not about proving this connection was real. It's about making sure that the next bond you build is with someone who doesn't run from it.